please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us create more exciting content for you. Thank you for joining us on this journey, a shocking turn of events. The silence was deafening. The registry office reeked of old paper and fresh ink, a bureaucratic scent that had nothing to do with the chapter they had just closed. Laura and Manuel sat across from each other, separated by a cold table and a stack of papers that sealed what was once love. She gripped the pen tightly, not from indecision, but to keep her fingers from trembling. Her name was already there, printed in black ink, waiting only for his signature. Manuel's. He, for his part, maintained his usual impassive expression. His features were rigid, his dark eyes hiding any trace of emotion. He took the pen with the precision of a man accustomed to definitive decisions. The stroke on the paper was swift, firm, without hesitation, finished. No tears were shed, no protest or last-ditch effort to reconcile. Just a quiet acknowledgement of the end. Laura felt a weight in her chest, not of regret, but of sheer exhaustion. It wasn't just the divorce. It was months of emotional turmoil, sleepless nights, and the struggle to maintain her dignity as everything around her crumbled. Now, there was nothing left to hold on to. She picked up the documents with stiff fingers and stood. The movement was small, insignificant, but inside her, something broke. The room began to spin. First, a sharp ringing in her ears. Then, darkness. The impact wasn't hard, but the sound of her body hitting the floor made Manuel's world collapse. He was by her side before anyone else could react. His voice, always so controlled, broke into a panicked roar. "Laura! Laura! Talk to me!" She didn't respond. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted, as if she were trying to breathe. Time seemed to stretch as the registry office employees rushed around, their voices a distant, jumbled echo. But Manuel only saw Laura. He only heard the frantic rhythm of his own heart. "Call an ambulance!" His voice was a guttural shout. The next few minutes were a blur of sirens and red lights reflecting in the glass of the surrounding buildings. Manuel never let go of her hand. Even unconscious, Laura's skin was warm. Alive? He didn't know why that mattered so much. He didn't know why, after signing those papers, feeling her weak pulse beneath his fingers filled him with a desperation he hadn't felt in years. But then, at the hospital, everything changed. The smell of antiseptic and the monotonous beeping of monitors reached her before her eyes opened. Laura blinked against the stark white light, feeling the room gently sway. The white ceiling, the pale walls, everything so sterile, so empty. And then, she saw him. Manuel was there. The impeccable suit from hours ago was now wrinkled, his tie loosened. But what truly caught her attention were his eyes. He looked at her as if he had seen a ghost, as if he were completely lost. Before Laura could speak, the door opened and a doctor entered, holding a clipboard with an expression that was a bit too professional for what he was about to say. "Ms. Laura, we have your test results." He paused, as if expecting her to already know. "Your fainting was caused by a drop in blood pressure. It's quite common, considering your condition." Laura frowned. "My condition?" The doctor paused again, then a gentle smile spread across his face. "Congratulations, you're pregnant. 3 months along." The silence that followed was absolute. Laura blinked, her mind racing in 1,000 directions, trying to process the words, looking for a logical flaw, any explanation other than this one. Pregnant, and when her eyes finally met Manuel's, she knew nothing would ever be the same. He was motionless. His eyes, which always hid everything, were now wide open in a way she had never seen before. For the first time in his life, Manuel was completely lost. The end of their story had become the beginning of something much bigger. Wow, what a bombshell. What do you think Manuel will do now that he knows? Will they reconcile, or will this new reality push them further apart? Tell me your predictions in the comments. A past unraveled. Laura felt the air grow heavy around her. The doctor's words still echoed in the silent room, as if time had stopped the moment they were spoken. Pregnant. She didn't know why the news hit her so hard. It wasn't as if she had never considered the possibility. She'd ignored symptoms, blamed her fatigue on the stress of the divorce, and dismissed nausea as anxiety. It all made sense now, but knowing was a world away from feeling. And in that moment, she felt the shock like a jolt of electricity. Manuel was still standing there, motionless, his eyes locked on her as if he were waiting for a reaction, a confirmation, anything to help him process this new reality. But Laura had no answers. She shifted her gaze, focusing on a spot on the white bedsheet, needing something solid. This changes nothing. The words escaped her before she could hold them back, cold and firm, a wall she was trying to build between herself and the chaos swirling inside her. But Manuel noticed. He always did. He saw the slight tremor in her voice, the way her hands, resting on the sheet, were clenched. He took a step forward. Laura felt his presence fill the space between them, the familiar woody scent of his cologne, a smell she knew better than she liked. He had always been there, on her skin, in their sheets, in the moments when they were a couple, and she let herself believe it could last forever. But now, she had to stay in control. This is our child, Laura. His voice lacked its usual firmness. It wasn't an argument or a command. It was a simple fact. One that carried the weight of everything they had lost, and everything that, in some way, still existed between them. Laura lifted her gaze, and their connection was palpable. Manuel didn't look like the man who had signed the divorce papers just hours before. That man was cold, distant, untouchable. But this man, standing before her, had a face marked by the shock of the news, his dark eyes filled with an emotion she didn't want to decipher. Because if she looked too long, she might find traces of the love she was desperately trying to bury. She took a slow breath, tasting the metallic tang of uncertainty on her tongue. I don't need you for this, Manuel. She saw him blink as if the words were a sudden blow. Don't be ridiculous. The response was sharp, cutting, but the anger wasn't in his voice. It was somewhere deeper, more dangerous. She refused to back down. Ridiculous! For not wanting you to interfere in my life? In your life? He let out a short, incredulous laugh. This isn't just about you, Laura. She gritted her teeth. Oh no? Because it seems like, until a few minutes ago, none of this mattered to you. You signed those papers, Manuel. I'm not your wife anymore. He leaned in slightly, closing the distance between them. But I am still the father of this child. Laura's heart raced, but she kept her face impassive. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Manuel ran a hand through his hair, an impatient gesture she knew well. He was wrestling with something inside himself. Do you really think you can exclude me from this? She looked away. The truth? She didn't know. She didn't know how to handle this, how to move on without the weight of the past pressing down on her. I need time. It was the first truly honest thing she had said since the news hit her. He was silent for a moment, watching her as if trying to decipher her every thought. I'm not going anywhere, Laura. She closed her eyes. That was what she feared. Because no matter how much she tried to deny it, a part of her wanted to believe he was telling the truth, and that part was too dangerous to listen to. Now we know the heartbreaking reason for their divorce. Do you think Manuel has the capacity to change? Can Laura ever trust him again? Let me know your thoughts. A fragile hope. Laura looked away, feeling the suffocating weight of Manuel's presence. He remained there, watching her with that intensity that always left her vulnerable. But now, there was no room for vulnerability, not after everything that had happened. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find a shred of calm in the whirlwind of her mind. But all she found was the echo of a past that never truly left her. Their story was never ordinary. At first, it seemed invincible. The first meeting was by chance, one of those moments that destiny orchestrates with surgical precision. Laura was in Rome for a conference, Manuel for a business meeting. Two strangers in a foreign city, united by chance and by the undeniable spark that ignited the moment their eyes met. He was confident, charming in a way that went beyond words. There was something in the way he looked at her, as if he saw something in her that no one else saw. Laura was not impulsive, but that night when Manuel invited her to dinner, she accepted without hesitation. Rome was their beginning. Nights in dimly lit restaurants, whispered conversations about dreams, promises murmured between the sheets. Laura had never felt anything like it before. The world seemed more vibrant with him, more intense. And Manuel, he made her feel alive in a way no one else had. When they returned home, it wasn't long before things got even more serious. Their courtship quickly became an engagement, and soon, a marriage that, on the surface, seemed perfect. But perfection was an illusion. The first cracks appeared silently, like tiny fissures in a wall that still looked intact from a distance. Manuel was a man of insatiable ambition. He didn't just want the best, he demanded it. He was meticulous, strategic, determined to build an unshakable empire. And at first, Laura admired that. But she soon realized his ambition consumed everything around him, including her. Nights once filled with long dinners and laughter became lonely. Manuel spent more time in meetings than at home. When he came back, it was too late for any meaningful conversation. The silence grew between them, filling the space once occupied by desire, laughter, and love. Laura tried to convince herself it was just a phase, that things would go back to normal. But then came his demands. Manuel never raised his voice, or explicitly forbade her from doing anything. But there was always a comment, a suggestion, a look that said more than words. "You don't need to work anymore. I can give you everything. That dress is a bit daring, don't you think? I don't think it's a good idea for you to travel alone. What will people think?" At first, they were small concessions. Nothing seemed big enough to be a problem. But little by little, she realized she was disappearing within the marriage. Invitations to events became rarer, and outings with friends turned into veiled arguments. Laura no longer recognized the woman in the mirror, and when she finally gathered the courage to tell Manuel she felt suffocated, that she needed space, he simply didn't listen. "That's all in your head, Laura. I just want what's best for you." The best. What Manuel never understood was that the best for her was not what he thought was right. The first time she asked for a break, Manuel laughed. He truly laughed, as if the idea were absurd. "You're being dramatic." The second time, he was silent for a few seconds before simply changing the subject. And the third time, when Laura could no longer breathe in the marriage, he looked at her with disbelief. "I don't know what else you need. I've given you everything. Everything. Except freedom. Except choice. Except the feeling that she still owned her own life." That's how their love was lost. Not in a dramatic scandal, not in a devastating betrayal, but in the slow, irreversible erosion of a marriage that had stopped being a home. And now, here in the hospital, forced to face the man she once loved more than anything, Laura felt like she was back in that moment. The past infiltrated the present like a ghost refusing to disappear. Manuel was no longer her husband. He no longer had control over her. But somehow, he still held power over her feelings, and that terrified her. She took a slow breath, trying to keep her voice steady. You can want to be a part of this, Manuel, but I don't know if I want you near me. He didn't blink. Do you still hate me that much? Laura pressed her lips together. Hate you? I don't hate you, Manuel. That's the problem. For a moment, he looked confused. But then, something sparked in his eyes. Understanding and a glimmer of hope. This isn't over, Laura. She felt her heart clench. It is over, Manuel. We signed those papers. But a piece of paper doesn't erase what we were. Laura looked away. But it can stop us from being something again. The answer hung in the air. The past haunted them, and whether they wanted to or not, they would have to face it. A second chance? Manuel was not a man who accepted defeat. For him, everything was a matter of strategy, planning, and control. He always knew what he wanted and how to get it. He had built his career that way, keeping his life meticulously organized. The world was a chessboard, and he was always the most skilled player. But Laura was never a piece in his game. And now, for the first time, Manuel didn't know what to do. He watched her from across the room, his arms crossed over his chest, as if to protect himself from her proximity. Since the news of the pregnancy, Laura had grown more distant, rejecting any attempts to get close. But there were moments when he saw her resistance waver, when their eyes met for a little too long, when their fingers touched by accident, when the silence between them became heavier than words. She still felt something for him. He knew it. But would it be enough? Manuel clenched his jaw and looked out the window. Outside, the day unfolded, indifferent to the chaos inside him. He hated this feeling of powerlessness, this uncertainty crawling under his skin like a poison. He needed to prove he had changed. But how? If he was honest with himself, he didn't know how to change. Laura had always been his exception, his ruin and his salvation. And now, everything depended on his ability to convince her he would never leave her alone again. He turned to look at her, watching how she kept her gaze fixed on the floor, her arms still crossed like an invisible barrier. You can't push me away from this, Laura. She slowly lifted her eyes, and he saw the internal battle reflected there. I'm not trying to push you away, but that doesn't mean I trust you. Manuel took a deep breath, holding back his instinctive response. The old version of him would have argued, using logic to prove he was right. But that had never worked with Laura. If he wanted her to believe him, he had to act differently. He took a step forward. Laura didn't retreat, but her body tensed. I know words aren't enough, but if you give me a chance, I'll prove I'm different. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you think this is a contract, Manuel? Something that can be solved with promises and guarantees? He studied her for a moment before answering. No, I think it's much more than that. His response took her by surprise. Laura blinked. Her lips parted as if she were about to argue, but no words came out. He moved closer, just enough to feel her quickening breath. Just let me be here. She held his gaze. And when things get difficult, will you still be here? He didn't hesitate. Yes, and when your work demands everything from you, I choose you. Laura closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing his words. When she opened them again, Manuel knew she wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. But something in her had changed. He saw it in the way she didn't retreat this time, in how her eyes lingered on his a little longer before she looked away. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. The following days passed in a strange rhythm, as if Laura was living between two worlds. One was the past, a persistent memory of broken promises and the slow erosion that led to their divorce. The other was the present, an undeniable reality where her body was nurturing a new life, and Manuel was more present than ever before. She wanted to cling to logic, to convince herself he was the same man, just temporarily changed by the shock of the pregnancy. But with each passing day, that certainty became harder to maintain. He was there, not just physically, but emotionally. For the first ultrasound, Laura went alone. She wanted that moment for herself, without his presence altering her feelings. But the moment she heard the baby's heartbeat for the first time, something inside her broke. And then, as she left the office, Manuel was waiting for her. "How was it?" he asked. Without urgency or demand, Laura looked at him, her expression serious but with a new, contained anxiety. She had wanted him to be there. She hesitated, but for some reason, she handed him the tiny ultrasound photo. A long silence passed as Manuel looked at the image. Then, without a word, he put the photo in his wallet as if it were the most precious thing he had ever owned. Laura looked away, her chest tight. She couldn't give in. But for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted to keep running. The days turned into weeks, and Manuel didn't back down. He was present. He wasn't invasive or pushy. He was just there. When Laura had morning sickness, he knew what to bring. When fatigue overtook her, he would appear without warning, leaving a decaf coffee and a pillow for her back. When she woke up in the middle of the night, scared by the weight of her responsibility, she'd find a short text. "If you need anything, I'm here." And somehow, that simple message calmed her. She started to see him differently. Or perhaps she started to let herself see a side of him that had always been there, but was hidden by her fears and past hurts. Manuel listened. He was no longer the man who ignored her feelings or changed the subject when she needed space. Now, when she spoke, he listened. He didn't try to fix her or convince her of anything. He simply listened, and that disarmed her more than anything else. But then came the first major test. It was late when Laura left work, exhausted, feeling like she was carrying the weight of the world. As she drove home, her mind was a chaos of disconnected thoughts. She needed a hot bath, sleep, and a moment to forget that her life was out of control. When she arrived at her building, she found Manuel leaning against his car, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Her heart raced. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated for a second. "We need to talk." Laura closed her eyes, too tired for another argument. "Not today, Manuel. It's important," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Everything's important to you now, isn't it?" He held her gaze. "Yes, because you are important." The words hit her like a punch. Manuel had never been good at admitting his feelings, but now he did it with a disarming simplicity. Laura felt her throat tighten. "What do you want?" He took a deep breath. "I need to know how far this goes, Laura. I need to know if I have a chance." She looked away. "I can't give you that answer now." He said it softly. "Then I'll wait." Laura held her breath. "And what if I'm never ready?" Manuel took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "Then I'll wait anyway." That was the first time Laura cried since it all began. And it was the first time Manuel didn't try to fix her. He was simply there, holding her hand and letting her feel everything she needed to feel. She didn't know if she could choose him again, but in that moment, she realized she might not need to keep running. A love conquered, the months passed in a blur. Time, once a relentless enemy, now became a silent ally, allowing Laura and Manuel to navigate this new reality at a pace they could both handle. He was still there, present at every appointment, attentive to every detail, always making sure she didn't have to carry the burden alone. And Laura, little by little, began to allow herself to trust. Not completely, not without reservations, but enough to accept the hot coffee he handed her, to let him walk her home when she was too tired to drive, and to let him be close. Then, in an instant, everything fell apart. It was a normal day. Laura left her doctor's office with a quiet smile. The pregnancy was going well, the baby was healthy, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at ease. Then she saw Manuel across the street. She knew he would come for her, as he always did lately. But something was different today. Something tense, rigid. Laura frowned and crossed the street, feeling a growing unease. Is everything okay? Manuel didn't answer immediately. His jaw was tight, his dark eyes filled with something she couldn't decipher. Then he blurted it out. Were you with him? Laura blinked. With who? Edward. The name came out laced with venom, and only then did Laura understand. Edward was her old colleague, a friend who had been there when her marriage was crumbling. But Manuel had always hated him, seeing him as a threat, even when Laura insisted there was nothing between them. Her chest tightened. Manuel, I ran into him by chance. We just talked for a few minutes. But he wasn't listening. Sure, just a coincidence, right? The same guy who spent years waiting for me to make a mistake. His tone was getting colder, harsher. In that moment, Laura was transported back to the past, to a time when her every word was met with suspicion, when every move was a threat to the control Manuel insisted on having. And the worst part was she saw in his eyes that he knew he was doing it. He saw the exact moment she closed herself off again. But instead of backing down, he pushed forward. Are you still talking to him? His voice was low but filled with a dark intensity. Laura crossed her arms. I'm not answering that kind of question. Manuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course not, because you're never wrong, are you, Laura? She felt a lump in her throat. Didn't he realize what he was doing? Manuel, stop! But he didn't. I should have known. You've always had a knack for trusting the wrong people. The words were spoken without thought, but the impact was immediate. Laura stood frozen, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her chest. Something inside her broke. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. I'm not doing this again. Her voice came out low, but firm. Manuel realized his mistake too late. Laura, but she was already walking away. You promised you changed. He ran a hand over his face as if trying to contain something. I did change. Then why are you still trying to control me? He had no answer. Laura let out her breath, her chest trembling. I need space. No. Manuel's response was immediate, but this time it wasn't a command. It was a plea. Don't push me away, Laura. She closed her eyes. Then give me a reason not to. The silence was devastating, and when Manuel finally tried to speak, it was too late. She was gone. In the following days, Manuel tried to call and visit, but Laura wouldn't answer. He finally went to her house to find the door closed, the lights off, and a sympathetic neighbor. She traveled, the man said. She rented the place out for a while, said she was going to take a break. Manuel stood there, unable to react. Laura was gone. For real this time. And maybe she wouldn't come back. His heart hammered in his chest, his breath short. His mind told him he had lost her. But for the first time in his life, Manuel realized that wanting to change wasn't enough. He had to prove it. And above all, he had to be patient. Laura was far away, but if she came back, he would be ready. This time, without trying to control or convince her, he would just wait. Because for the first time, he was willing to be the man she deserved. A new beginning. The void left by Laura was worse than anything Manuel had ever felt. It wasn't just the anger or the frustration of becoming the man he promised he'd never be again. It was fear. The fear of having lost her forever. In the days that followed, her silence was unbearable. She wouldn't answer his calls or messages. He went to her apartment, but she wouldn't open the door. When he decided to step back and wait for her to come to him, fate showed him he wouldn't get that luxury. The call came in the middle of the night. The hospital's number glowed on his phone, and everything in him froze. Mr. Manuel? His own name made his heart pound against his ribs. Yes? You need to come to the hospital now. It's about Laura. He didn't remember the drive. only the metallic taste of panic in his mouth, his trembling hands on the steering wheel, the suffocating feeling that if anything happened to her or the baby, he would never forgive himself. When he arrived, the hospital was bathed in cold, indifferent light. He strode through the corridors until a nurse recognized him. "Where is she?" The woman hesitated for a second. Ms. Laura was admitted with complications. They had to take her into surgery. The word hit Manuel like a punch. Surgery? She had a premature placental abruption. The situation is delicate, but the doctors are doing everything they can. Delicate. The word echoed in his mind as the world lost its form. He sat in the nearest chair, but he couldn't feel anything. He was floating, his entire existence reduced to this one moment. For the first time in his life, Manuel understood what it meant to be utterly helpless. There was nothing he could do, no strategy to formulate, no money to pay to fix this. He could only wait and pray. Time became distorted. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally, a doctor appeared. Manuel shot to his feet, his heart hammering. "How is she?" The doctor sighed, and Manuel felt the weight of the sound before the words were even spoken. "The baby is in fetal distress. We need to act fast." It was then that Manuel understood. They had to choose, save Laura or save the baby. The floor seemed to vanish beneath him. "We'll do everything we can for both," the doctor said, trying to stay calm. "But Mr. Manuel, if we have to prioritize one, we need your decision now." The decision. The moment that would define everything. He looked at the closed door of Laura's room. Would he lose her? After everything, after finally understanding that he loved her in a way he never comprehended before, after realizing she was the center of his world, would he have to let her go? Then, for a second, a memory flashed in his mind. Laura, feeling the baby move for the first time, putting her hands on her belly with a look of pure adoration. Laura, caressing the ultrasound photo as if she had known that tiny life for years. Laura, whispering one night, not knowing he was listening, "I would do anything for my child." That was it. That was what truly mattered. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Then he looked at the doctor. "Save the baby." The doctor nodded and disappeared down the hall. Manuel was left alone, feeling the weight of the hardest decision he had ever made. Time passed slowly, and when the surgery room door finally opened, everything inside him stopped. Because there, surrounded by nurses, with a tired but living gaze, was Laura. She survived. And the baby, too. But something was different. Laura was weak, pale, her eyes heavy with exhaustion and pain. When her eyes finally met his, something shone there. Not anger, not total relief, but something profound. A mix of gratitude and confusion. She moved her lips, her voice a whisper. You chose the baby?" Manuel's chest tightened. "I chose what you would have chosen." The silence between them was thick. And then, tears came. Not from him, but from her. Laura wasn't crying from weakness or pain. She was crying because for the first time, she saw Manuel understand what it meant to love someone without trying to possess them, without trying to mold them. He understood. And in that instant, Manuel knew his life would never be the same. This time, he hadn't fought to win Laura. He had fought to be the man she deserved. And maybe, for the first time, he was close to succeeding. The journey continues. The months that followed were a blur of change. Laura needed time to recover from the surgery. The baby was under observation for a few weeks, but soon the doctors confirmed he was healthy. A boy, small, but strong. They named him Mateo. Laura chose the name, and Manuel didn't object. For the first time, he accepted something without question. He had made all the wrong decisions in the past. This one, he wanted to be hers. But acceptance didn't mean everything was easy. If there was one thing Manuel had learned, it was that love cannot be forced. Love is won, day after day. And that's exactly what he did. Laura's house became a quiet sanctuary where time seemed to slow down. Manuel came almost every day, but he wasn't intrusive. He never crossed the boundaries she set. When Laura needed to rest, he stayed with Mateo. When Mateo cried in the middle of the night, he was there before Laura could get up. And when she felt lost, exhausted, and overwhelmed, Manuel was simply there, without demanding, without pressuring, just waiting. And Laura noticed. She realized that for the first time, Manuel wasn't trying to control her. He wasn't trying to define what they would be. He was just present, a silent certainty, a solid foundation she could choose to use or not. He had changed, and so had she. At some point, Laura found herself watching him with new eyes. Not the Manuel she had left, not the Manuel she feared, but the Manuel who held Mateo in his arms with a tenderness she never imagined he possessed. The Manuel who didn't get impatient when the baby cried. The Manuel who made her coffee every morning without saying a word, just leaving the mug on the counter before he left. The Manuel who understood when she needed silence. Little by little, Laura felt the armor she had built begin to crack. Time passed. And then, something happened. The first time he touched her again was by accident. Laura was on the sofa, holding Mateo, when Manuel sat next to her. He gently ran his hand over the baby's hair, and his arm brushed hers. An insignificant touch, but Laura felt it. She felt the warmth of his skin, the familiarity of the gesture. She felt the years come rushing back in a single second. Her heart pounded, and when she looked up, Manuel was already watching her. They stayed like that for a moment, silent, a mutual understanding. Then Laura looked away because she wasn't ready yet. But she knew in that instant that it was only a matter of time. The problem was, time wasn't waiting for them. That night, it was raining hard. Manuel was about to leave when Laura, watching the storm through the window, finally made a decision. Stay? The word was so soft that for a second, Manuel thought he imagined it. But then she turned to look at him, and in her eyes, there was something new, something definitive. He didn't ask if he could, and she didn't need to answer. Because when he approached, Laura lifted her face to meet him. The kiss was slow, unlike any they had shared before. There was no rush, no need. It was a choice. And when he pulled away, Laura finally understood. They weren't getting back together because they needed each other. They were getting back together because they wanted each other. This time, their love wasn't a power game. It was a partnership. And finally, it was enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us create more exciting content for you. Thank you for joining us on this journey.